Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we talk all things Colorado Rockies. The Rockies, as I'm recording this, just got a spring training win against the Chicago Cubs. They win 14-7. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the hitting, the batting, and then we're going to be talking about the outfield looks pretty strong. There is someone in that outfield that I want to highlight as someone to watch, maybe not in the best possible way, but someone that will need to play well, I think, early on in the season. And then, of course, the position battle. We've talked a lot about first base. We're going to talk a little bit more about what it looks like at second. Tyler Freeman obviously looks like he's going to be the guy, but we have some guys behind him that have been playing well so far to start this spring that could make things a little bit more interesting. But first, let's obviously start with this game against the Chicago Cubs, where the Colorado Rockies. I said the bats were red hot, and it might have been more than red hot. They were absolutely on fire against the Cubs. 16 hits, and it was a slugfest. Mickey Moniak got things started with a leadoff home run. TJ Rumfield, who's been quiet this entire spring training and preseason, notches not one but two home runs. Tovar hits a home run, and Kyle McCann even gets in on the fun with a home run as well. So the Rockies score 14 runs on 16 hits. And they also have 5 home runs. And so, this is obviously really encouraging for the Rockies, a team that just struggled mightily at the plate last year. And again, a lot of this, especially early spring, has to be taken with a grain of salt. Now, they've scored 5 or more runs in every game but that first game against the Diamondbacks. You will see a trend, though, in spring training, especially early on. A lot of these teams are scoring 3, 4, 5+ runs, just because you're typically facing some pitchers that probably are not going to be at the major league level in the 2026 season, but it's still of note, and it's important that you see some of these Rocks actually start to play with a little bit of confidence. Brenton Doyle's been hitting the ball really well so far this spring. And now to get Rumfield in on the fun is obviously encouraging, especially at first where there aren't a lot of answers yet of who will possibly be the guy. And I think a lot of it will come down to who's going to provide the most offensively when it comes to that first base position. Zach Veen goes hitless in this game. And this is coming off just a few days ago where he hits that walk-off home run against the White Sox. But overall, you have to be really, really happy with how the team as a whole looked in terms of hitting. Pitching, this actually looked like a mid-2010s pitching team for the Rockies, giving up 7 runs. But obviously, this is just spring. A lot of these guys are trying out different pitches, but ultimately highlighting the hitting, being able to build confidence. We've talked about that. That will be really important to carry that confidence over. Obviously, we're about a week away from when the Rockies will be taking on Team USA, and that will probably look very different. And I don't know who all is going to be available to play in that game, because the Rockies obviously have a handful of players that are going to be playing for their respective nations. So that game will be kind of I don't even know if you can call it a litmus test, because you're going from playing a very, very average or below average competition to essentially the best of the best. So that game will be fun, and that's about a week away. So I will actually be at that game. You better believe I'm probably going to be wearing one of these jerseys behind me. And I think it should be a ton of fun to actually to see. You just don't get too many opportunities to see your team play against Team USA. So that should be fun. Now let's obviously move on, and let's talk about some of the pitching. We'll start with the bad. Jaden Hill, I mean, he was bad today. He gives up 4 earned runs. And it all started by getting behind, and that is a theme for the Rockies of something that they want to avoid. They want to get ahead in counts. They don't want to be giving up these early base runners. hit by pitch, walk, single, bases loaded, and obviously 4 earned runs later. Just not a good outing for Hill. His control will be a big thing in terms of how he will be successful in 2026. He's a guy who throws so hard, and we've talked about him, and we've talked about this bullpen having a lot of firepower. But when you can throw it 100 miles an hour, control has to be there, or else you're gonna fall behind, and you're gonna get into situations like Hill did today. So obviously not a great outing, but it's one luckily that will not matter when the season starts. It gets wiped away, and it will be a good reminder for him of how important it is, obviously, to be able to get ahead in some of these counts and not make mistakes like a hit by pitch or giving up walks, just putting yourself in situations that are really hard to get out of. But there are some positives today in pitching. The Rockies gave up 7 runs, but Antonio Senzatella gave the Rockies 3 innings pitched, and just gives up a hit, a walk, and has 3 strikeouts. We saw more of his off-speed stuff. Now, we did see his fastball today, and it's topping out about 95 miles an hour, but we are seeing more of the off-speed stuff that we kind of saw in his first appearance. And so that's going to be a theme for Senzatella. And if he can carve out a role where he can give you anything from 1 to 3 innings pitched, is great. You want someone who can eat innings. You want someone in that middle relief position, or obviously in games where the Rockies have fallen behind, and have someone that can give you 3, 4, 5 innings. And since Senzatella can do that, if they want him to be effective, though, it's a 1 or 2 innings max kind of guy. But really encouraging to see that. Encouraging to see him obviously just to have 3 scoreless frames. And Jose Quintana also giving you a scoreless inning, as well as RJ Pettit. He gave you 2 scoreless innings. So with the bad, there is some good. Senzatella is the biggest one to note, just because he's going to be under the microscope more than anyone. He's pitched more innings than anyone right now. And I think there's a reason for that. I think Alan Leichman wants to kind of figure out what they can do with Senzatella. He's getting paid like he needs to pitch, and that will be an expectation in 2026. We've talked about it once. I really don't think he should be a starter. I don't think he will be a starter. I think he will be in the bullpen. But just something for us to keep our eye on, just as the spring progresses, because we're getting close to a month away from the season. It's great to have baseball back. It's fun to just to see, hey, there's some positive things here and there, but ultimately what matters is when that season starts for the Colorado Rockies. Then let's talk about the outfield, because this is one of the stronger position groups for the Rockies. I think it'd be a fair argument if you said it's the best position group for the Rockies, especially just because with Doyle and Beck, that feels like a pretty good 1-2 punch. That third outfielder, though, I think that's where it becomes a little bit more of a question, and something that I teased at the beginning of the show. Because Jake McCarthy, speed-wise, is elite as it gets. He is probably one of the fastest players in baseball. He defensively should be pretty solid. I think I'm more questioning his bat. And defensively, it's not like he's a rock star. I think he'll just be able to play his role. But let's talk about his bat, because his bat, all of 2025, even though it was just about 206 at-bats, a lot of it was below league average. Just about all of it was below league average. His ability to draw walks and his ability to avoid strikeouts were really the only things that were above that average. And so that will be a question early on in this season for McCarthy, because it really feels like all signs point to him being the opening day guy. But what the Rockies need to avoid is they need to just find productivity throughout this lineup, because they just did not have that last year. And McCarthy needs to be better than a 220 hitter for the Rockies. And so that will be something to know. And this is a position group where he's going to be challenged to have to play well. And that's why I note this, right? Because you have Tyler Freeman, who will be able to play in the outfield. It's believed that he's going to probably be the guy at second, but he can play in the outfield. Castro can play in the outfield. Troy Johnson can play in the outfield, and it's expected that he'll make that 26-man roster. And then, of course, Zach Veen, who we've talked about has had this Hulk-like transformation. And the hope is, I think we all want to see Zach Veen find his way back into the lineup. And even if it's just, hey, you're a guy that might get a start every 4 or 5 games, great. But I think that will be something to note early on in the season is if Veen can find his way onto this 26-man roster. And McCarthy struggles early on. There's a real world where we see a swap at that spot, most likely in right field. So what that means for McCarthy is that bat has to be solid, and obviously defensively he has to be good. If the bat's struggling and you're bad defensively, there's just no room for that. And so for McCarthy, I think more than anyone else in the outfield, he'll have the magnifying glass. I've brought up magnifying glass twice now in this show, which is far more than any other show that I've talked about. But it is worth noting for McCarthy. You obviously acquired him in that trade with the Diamondbacks. You expect him to be a bit of a veteran leader for this young Rockies team that's obviously in rebuild mode. But he has to lead by example, and that is being solid at the plate, being solid defensively, as well as just being a leader for this team. So for McCarthy, that's not me saying I don't think he can do it. I have a lot more confidence in McCarthy than I do like someone like Edward Julian. So definitely important to note, though, and something to follow along in this outfield, especially the deeper we get into spring. I just knocked something over on my side. Especially the deeper we get into spring, as well as just the start of the season. So just watch that, as well as we've talked about position battles. We talked a little bit about it with the outfield. We've talked about it at length at the first base position. And for the second base position, right, there is maybe more depth than we possibly thought. But it kind of goes back to the outfield and first base. And what did the Rockies do with Tyler Freeman, who gives you a lot of utility potential? On top of that, there's always a question is if Tyler Freeman deals with back injuries and he's not good to go, who's going to be the guy at second? Hopefully it is the former rather than the latter, and Tyler Freeman is someone that you can plug and play throughout both the infield and the outfield. And what that would mean is it gives an opportunity for both Ryan Ritter and Adele Amador, who have looked really solid to start spring. Amador, I think there is still a little bit of the jury is out on this guy, and you could say that for Ritter as well. Amador has just had a lot more struggles, especially all throughout 25, as well as just in the league he played in the winter. But it's been a really positive start for this spring training and offseason, or preseason, I should say, for these young second basemen. And ultimately, if you can get something out of Ryan Ritter or Amador where they can actually start and be playable at second base, that unlocks a lot for the Rockies, because at that point, now you can look at playing Freeman in the outfield. You can look at him playing first. You're just able to mix and match more. And we've talked about that. Having more of these utility guys that are good to play throughout the lineup and throughout the infield and outfield. And so with that, for the Rockies, I think there's just a huge advantage to some of these younger guys developing. Something we talked about in the last show, it is critical for some of these younger guys to step up and start playing well. And so at the second base position, my thought fully, I fully expect Tyler Freeman to be the guy to start the year. I expect him to be really solid for the Rockies. But if they are confident in Ritter or Amador, and they're not sure about first, they're not sure about somewhere in the outfield, there's just more to work with. You also have Castro, who could play second or third or first. Well, you wouldn't want Castro at first, but the outfield. They just have a lot of these younger guys that you want to see get opportunity, but you also want a bit of a tight leash after what happened last season. It's just been an encouraging start at this second base position, and the idea of having more depth there and having more talent there is certainly one that we want to take note of. But again, ultimately, it kind of goes back to the start of spring. You're facing pitchers that you're probably not going to see, right, in the regular season. And so that's where these younger guys are going to have to prove it. And ultimately, as spring goes on, we'll have more answers of, all right, what's this roster actually going to look like? What is the depth going to look like? And where should we see some of these guys in their starting positions? So with that, though, it's been an encouraging start to the spring. The bats have looked good. Some of these pitchers have already stepped up. And we're already really, really getting into some of these position battles that have been a lot of fun to follow and to watch. But with that, this is the end of another Rockies Daily. I'm Scott Ayers. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, share with your friends, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I will see you tomorrow.